So today's webinar, Finding Money for College and Completing the FAFSA. It's brought to you today by Keystone's Guidance Department. My name is Mrs. Morgan Dakota. I'm one of the school counselors here at Keystone. For some of you, it might be the very first time you've been in a New Row classroom. The feature we're going to be using today is the chat feature. So please join me in the room chat and let me know where you're joining me from. I'm in Pennsylvania. Connecticut. So we got some Northeastern, Mid-Atlantic people here today, and New Jersey, right? East Coast, Best Coast. Isn't that what they always say? I think that's just what I say. So let's talk a little bit about financial aid and what it is. So financial aid is money for educational expenses for after high school. So any kind of post-high school education and training. Financial aid typically consists of grants, work study, loans, and scholarships, in addition to any savings that you as a student or that your family may have set aside for you to further your education. Grants do not have to be repaid. They're typically also referred to as gift aid, so those don't have to be repaid. Work study, that's money that students earn by getting a job at college, typically on campus, maybe working at a desk in a residence hall, maybe working in the dining hall, in the gymnasium or field house during sporting events and things like that. You're going to earn minimum wage, and that money will help you pay for your educational expenses. This money doesn't have to ever be repaid. You've earned it. And it's also not taken into account as income when assessing your financial eligibility for the following year. So work study is a good thing. Loans, I'll get into loans, both subsidized and unsubsidized loans in a couple minutes. Those do have to be repaid. And then there are also scholarships. Now they can be awarded from a variety of sources. Scholarships are funds that don't have to be repaid. Typically they're based on either academic merit or athletic merit, but they can also be awarded based on a student's interests, hobbies, ethnicity, religious affiliation, and also financial need. Students may have to maintain a certain GPA or continue to participate in a sport or hobby in order to keep the scholarship over multiple years. Many colleges and universities, they have endowments or a pile of money, a pot of money that they have to give scholarships from. They award academic and need-based scholarships to their accepted students. And there are other places to look for scholarships. We recommend students create an account with Tallo. Our student success advisors run, I think it's a monthly webinar on establishing a Tallo account. We also have information in the Keystone Guidance course about Tallo. It's a great way to get scholarships because students go on to Tallo, they create an account, and then opportunities find you. So in the case of Tallo, you don't have to sift through a lot of information. Based on your demographic information and the other information you complete about yourself, opportunities and scholarships find you. Another site that I recommend to students, it's been around, I've been recommending it probably the last 20 years. It's called FastWeb, another place to look for scholarships. It's best not to just kind of surf the internet and surf the web. There's a lot of, kind of disreputable stuff out there, some scams around scholarships and things like that. It's better to stick with reputable websites that have been vetted and that you're told about. So generally, the amount of student aid that you're eligible for is based on financial need. With the federal government and the state government and that kind of, that financial award and also money that you get from a college or university, your financial aid is going to be determined by two things: your EFC, which is your expected family contribution, and the COA, the cost of attendance. The EFC comes from the information you report on the FAFSA. So this is going to take into account student income, parent income, assets, how many people are in the household, how many of those people are attending college. You can go to studentaid.gov to get the complete explanation of the formula, but that's the basic information behind the formula. The cost of attendance, that's going to be determined by the school, by the college or university. It includes tuition, fees, room and board, transportation, study abroad expenses, employment expenses if you're having a co-op or student teaching, things like that. So financial need is determined by subtracting the expected family contribution from the cost of attendance. The cost of attendance is going to differ at every school. So your financial aid will differ at every school, and you'll have a different financial aid package from every school. So if you decide to attend a community college, very different cost of attendance than going to a private selective liberal arts college or university. So keep that in mind. There is a way to determine how much financial aid, roughly how much financial aid you'd be eligible for before you complete your FAFSA. At studentaid.gov, which is the government's financial aid website, you can kind of enter estimated, rough financial information and just get an estimate of if you'd be eligible for a Pell Grant, if you were eligible for work study, and then loans that you may or may not be eligible for. So if you're not quite ready to do the FAFSA, or you're, discussing it with your family, that's a good way to get an estimate. So you may have heard people talk about the FAFSA. What is that? It's the free application for federal student aid. There are websites out there that will charge you to complete the FAFSA. They're scams. You don't want to go there. I think a lot of them have been shut down and weeded out. It is free to complete the application for federal student aid at studentaid.gov. That's the only website that you want to use. The FAFSA does have to be completed every year that aid is needed. So every year that you are in college, you're going to complete the FAFSA. There's a student portion and a parent portion. Both student and parent must complete their portions, and you'll always be using studentaid.gov. That's the website. The FAFSA always opens on October 1st, and you'll start prior to the year you attend college. So if you're a senior, you will be submitting the FAFSA this year. That way, even if you haven't yet applied to college, even if you don't know where you're going to apply yet, if you know you're attending, or if you're planning, thinking you're planning to attend, you need to complete the FAFSA. Deadlines vary from college to college. So start looking and make sure that you know what the deadline dates are. Colleges use your FAFSA information as well as the federal and state government to determine student aid. So it's a document used by multiple institutions, organizations to determine student aid. In order to complete the FAFSA, there are documents that you need: Social Security numbers, tax returns, both the parent and the student, bank statements, records of investment accounts, any information about untaxed income. Students need their driver's license. So there are quite a few documents that you have to make sure that you have on hand when you're going to complete your FAFSA. You can start the FAFSA, save it, and come back to it. It doesn't all have to be done in one sitting, but just to create some awareness around what you need to create that FAFSA. So if you are planning to start college in the fall of 2023, you need tax return information from 2021. It used to be you needed it for 1 year prior. Now they go back 2021. So if you're starting in 2023, it goes back to 2021. In order to sign your FAFSA, you're going to do that electronically, and both the parent and the student are going to set up a federal student aid account. You're both going to have a login, and you're both going to have an account. You'll have a unique username and password. You'll need an email address that you check. You need your name, date of birth, social security number, mailing address. You can pick your language preference. The FAFSA, or for the FSA ID and the FAFSA now, they're doing a two-step verification. So as part of the create an account process, you're going to have another way to verify your account. So they'll either text you a code, which is pretty common nowadays, send you something via email, or that you can use an authenticator. You can set up your FSA ID and then immediately go to the FAFSA and start completing the FAFSA. So that can all be done kind of around the same time. It's not like you have to wait. There are 7 sections currently on the FAFSA. I believe that's being reviewed, and some of those are going to go away over the next year or 2 years. You'll need your student demographic information, right? Your address, your name, your date of birth. You can also put in up to 10, colleges and universities. You don't have to already have applied. You don't have to be accepted. These are schools that you are either in the process of applying to, you're planning to apply to. You can always delete or add schools at a later date. So if you're unsure about this piece, that's fine. You can still start and complete your FAFSA. For financial aid purposes, you are either a dependent student or an independent student. And you'll be asked a series of questions to determine which category you fall into. An independent student many times is a student who is maybe in foster care, is a ward of the state, parents are deceased, being cared for, by someone else. The majority of students are going to be dependent students. And in that case, we require, the colleges, universities, the government, they require parent information. The parent demographics that are going to be collected, financial information from 2 years prior to when the student plans to attend college. There is something within the FAFSA that it's called the IRS retrieval tool. So the IRS retrieval tool, if you put your information in, it can connect you right to the IRS and will pull all your financial information from your tax returns. It doesn't work for every student. 1 year, it didn't work for my daughter. I have 2 children who've attended college, so I have lots of experience with the FAFSA. And 1 year, for some reason, it didn't pull her information. So we, had to enter it all in manually. You will sign and submit everything electronically, of course. That's where that FSA ID that you've come up with. If you or your parent are unable to sign the FAFSA or you decline to sign it, there is a way to do it, where you can print, sign, and submit it and mail the signature page. It's going to take longer for everything to get processed, though. When you do complete your FAFSA and you've signed everything, you get a confirmation page. On this page, you'll get information about with all the colleges that you've accepted, or that you've listed rather, and you can kind of compare information about the colleges. They recommend you use Firefox, Safari, or Chrome. Samantha, that's something you can check out on studentaid.gov. If you don't use any of those, you must allow pop-ups though, because other screens are going to pop up within a screen on the FAFSA. But Samantha, that's something that I would check out on the website. So this is a very common question. Who's my parent when I fill out the FAFSA? If both parents are alive, but the student doesn't reside with both parents, the student should list the parent who they reside with 50% or more of the time over the last 12 months. It doesn't matter who claims the student on their tax returns. It's the parent with whom the student resides the most over the past 12 months. And if that parent is remarried, you must report step-parent information. If that parent is remarried and there is a step-parent, you can see on the graphic, it kind of walks you through. You can find that information on studentaid.gov. And if you have any questions, they also have an 800 number you can always call. So very important that you get this right and make sure that you have the correct financial information. So you have completed your FAFSA. What happens next? You get something called the SAR, the Student Aid Report. So this is going to list for you what you are eligible for based on the information you and the parent have provided on the FAFSA. The SAR typically is sent very quickly. You get it by email. Also, your expected family contribution is calculated. As I talked about, they have a formula that's pretty much income driven that comes up with that expected family contribution. That's going to remain the same regardless of which school you decide to attend. So the first time, when my son was older, he was going to college, we did the FAFSA for the very first time. I hadn't done one since I was a student, and I, was completing it with my parents. So I didn't really remember a whole lot about it. And I knew, as a school counselor, I kind of knew what to expect. So you see that expected family contribution. It could be zero, depending on economics within your household. It could be $1,500. It could be $6,000. That is not the amount of a check you're going to write to anybody. That's just what they calculate your family, you and your family can pay for you per year. You can come up with that money to put towards your education. So it's not, it's just kind of their calculation. Again, you're not going to write a check for that amount to anybody. There are a couple things that can hold up the processing of your FAFSA. If anybody has defaulted on a student loan, if there's a question around citizenship, if for some reason, you had a typo on a social security number, anything like that could hold up the acceptance and verification of all your data. During the income portion of your data, any discrepancies that are flagged, you can always work those out with college's financial aid office. So the college you eventually attend, all the colleges you've applied to are going to give you a financial aid package. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit. But anything that's incorrect or needs to be verified or double checked, you have plenty of time to make that happen. Once you're accepted to a college, the school is going to determine your eligibility for aid at that college, and they're going to put together a financial aid package for you. This is a list of the things you're going to see in the financial aid offer, and it'll give you the ability to compare college to college to college, right? You can compare apples to apples and see where it makes sense for you to attend. The expected family contribution, again, is always going to be the same. You're going to have a list of the types and amounts of financial aid that college is specifically awarding you. You'll see any conditions placed on any of the awards. You may get a scholarship, but it may only be for your freshman year. It might not be for all 4 years. You'll get instructions on the steps you have to take to accept the package, all your rights and responsibilities. It'll be, made clear to you how you renew it. And if you have any questions or you want to appeal it, there'll be a process for that. There's also a policy. Each school is going to have a policy on satisfactory academic progress, so that you are remaining eligible for future aid. You may have a GPA, you may have a certain amount of credits you've got to take every semester to be considered full-time rather than part-time. So that will also be clearly outlined for you, what's expected of you as the student in order to maintain your financial aid. Depending on where you've applied to college, there might be some additional applications you have to complete. There's something called the CSS profile. This is completed through the College Board. This one you do have to pay for. To complete it once, it's $25, and you can send it to one college or university. It's $16 for each additional school. There are fee waivers available for it. This form, the CSS profile, is typically required from highly selective, like Patriot League schools, Ivy League schools, your very, very highly selective, very expensive schools. They want to look at the information that the FAFSA asks about family finances, but they want additional information. Does your family have a vacation home? Do you own any boats? Do you own property? Do you own businesses? So just an awareness that the profile may be required, and it's one that you have to pay for, in addition to just the FAFSA, which is free, never pay for the FAFSA. And if some of the colleges and universities you're thinking of applying to, if they require this and you have any questions around it when it comes time to complete it, do not hesitate to reach out to us in guidance, and we'll certainly walk you through it. In order to be eligible for federal student aid, so for the work study, for Pell Grants, which is free money, you have to complete your FAFSA. You can't be in default on any type of educational loan. You must be enrolled as a full-time student, regular student at an eligible institution, and you have to make satisfactory academic progress. So most students don't have any problem meeting those stipulations. There has been an increase in the Pell Grant. So the federal Pell Grant, the maximum award is $6,895. The maximum expected family contribution for eligibility is $5,446. You can get a Pell Grant for 12 full-time semesters, and then you can't get it anymore. So, that's why colleges publish a lot of data about their students and their graduates. It's always important to look and see what the 4-year graduation rate is. How many students graduate in their programs within 4 years? Because if it's going to take you quite a bit longer, or if you change majors a whole lot, that can get expensive as well. You have to attend college longer. Your federal Pell Grant may run out. You don't want to have that happen. So just something to always keep in mind. You want to do this as economically as possible. There is a way to monitor your eligibility for the Pell Grant semesters. There is a website to do that, National Student Loan Data System, nslds.ed.gov, and you can monitor it there. So that's the federal Pell Grant. There are campus-based programs. So this is money from the federal government, and every college is given a bit of money through both of these programs. The college decides how to give this money out. So the Pell Grant given out by the government based on the expected family contribution, that is across the board for all students. These are campus-based programs. FSEOG, that's a grant. Its priority is given to those students on a college campus who are getting Pell Grants. It's up to $4,000, and this is for very, financially needy students. There's also federal work study. This is given out as a pot of money that you can tap into, but you can only tap into it if you have a job on a college campus. So as an undergraduate, when I was getting my 4-year college degree, I was a work study student. I worked in the student union. I don't want to date myself, but I was in charge of the typewriter room in the student union. So it was many, many years ago. So I earned minimum wage for monitoring that room as students would type their term papers and other assignments. During my 4 years, though, we did kind of roll over into a more computer-based room with computers and printers. So these earnings do not count as income for subsequent years of the FAFSA, and statistics do show that students who work have a higher GPA. I think when students are busier, they do a better job of allotting their time, managing their time, and getting their schoolwork completed. All right, so that goes over a lot of the gift aid or the grants and things like that. There are also loans. I'm sure many of you have heard about the current student loan crisis. A lot of people have gotten in trouble with student loans. So the Federal Direct Loan Program offers 2 kinds of loans, subsidized and unsubsidized. They also have PLUS loans, which are for parents. And then they have a consolidation loan where if you have multiple loans, you can consolidate it into one. Direct subsidized and unsubsidized loans are in the name of the student. They don't check your credit. You don't have to have a cosigner, and you don't have to make payments while you're still an enrolled student. Repayment begins 6 months after you are at least half-time enrolled. So when you're done with school, you have within 6 months, you have a grace period of 6 months, then you have to start paying things back. The difference between the two types of loans, with a subsidized loan, that loan is accruing interest all the time, but the interest on a subsidized loan is paid by the government while you're enrolled. Unsubsidized loan, the interest on the loan is not paid by the government. It's capitalized and it's added on to the principal. So that's how some people that are currently way over their head on loans, that's how they kind of got in trouble with student loans. That interest was continually accruing and being added back to the principal. And if for some reason they weren't able to make their payments, they had to, take a break from making their payments. They didn't have the income after they graduated, to make those payments. That's where some people got into trouble. So very important that you understand about the difference in the types of loans. PLUS loans, these are available to parents, adoptive, step-parent, biological, parents of a dependent undergraduate student. For this type of loan, a credit check is required. If the applicant does have an adverse credit history, they can still get a PLUS loan by getting a cosigner. If they can't get a cosigner and they're denied the PLUS loan, the student can take additional loans. There's no annual limit to the amount that a parent can borrow. The cost of attendance minus the financial aid received is equal to the amount that is borrowed, though. Repayment begins pretty directly. That loan is given and it's paid to the college to pay for the student's education. 60 days later, the loan must start, you have to start repaying it. I took out a PLUS loan for one of my children to attend college, and I went through the FAFSA and took out a PLUS loan. So I'm familiar with this process. A lot of parents do it. It's pretty common. So let's look at different financial aid offers from different colleges. So you can see this is an old chart. I have to update it because the federal Pell Grant was about half of what it is now. So let's say you've applied to 3 colleges. Your expected family contribution is going to be the same across, and in this case, it's $2,000. That's what the federal government is saying you could probably put towards your education. Cost of attendance varies quite a lot between the 3 schools. Now you can see the Pell Grant stays the same. State grant increases with the cost of attendance. As the cost of attendance goes up, that state grant line, $3,690 or $3,900, $4,300. The FSEOG grant, that is given by the college or university. For the first school, they're not giving this student any money, but the school B and school C are both giving because the cost of attendance is higher. School C is giving the student a $12,000 institutional scholarship. This is very, very common with private colleges and universities. They have a much higher cost of attendance, but they know that students can go to public universities, like state universities, where the cost of attendance is much lower. In order to lure those students to their school and away from the less expensive state university, they'll give you something like the President's Scholarship, the Board of Trustees, Board of Governors Scholarship, and it'll be typically for 4 years. And what they're trying to do is lower that cost of attendance so that it's comparable with a state college or university. You can see this student got a private scholarship, maybe something in their community. They also get work study. As the cost of attendance is higher, there's more money that they can earn through that work study job. The student's also taking out loans. So we can see the total aid, the total financial aid package from each college differs greatly, $14,800 to $30,700. Now we have a gap. So this is the cost of attendance minus the aid. School A, the gap that has to be filled is only $5,000. School C, we're looking at $22,000. So unless the family has set aside, money to kind of fill in this gap, that could either be taken with a Parent Plus loan, with other private loans, and things like that. So very important to do exactly what I'm showing here if you're applying to multiple colleges. Sit down, finally examine and determine where it makes sense for you to attend based on your family circumstances, the financial aid package that you are given. You also have to kind of take a look at what is gift aid and what aid needs to be paid back. So, and as well as your Pell Grant eligibility, always wanting to keep that in mind as well. Lots of resources out there for you. Studentaid.gov, that's where you're going to get your FSA ID. That's where you're going to complete the FAFSA. You can chat with them on the website, live chat. You can email, you can phone. They can be found on Facebook, on Twitter. Very easy to get in touch with them. If you want to look now and kind of get an estimate on your federal student aid, you can do that FAFSA aid estimator on the studentaid.gov website. Always very important to, we don't want any of our students to have student loan issues like so many do. So just be aware of the resources. I am recording today's webinar. It will be in the Keystone Guidance course, which is in everyone's homeroom in Brightspace. So you can always take a look at this webinar at a future date. So if parents are separated, but living separately, okay, they're not divorced. Okay, so if they're not divorced, you need both parents. I believe that's how it is if they're not divorced. If they're divorced, and I would go on studentaid.gov just to make sure, I think it's quite different if they're divorced versus if they are still legally married. So, and that will, Samantha, that will be covered on the website. So, does anybody have any other questions? I know this is a lot of information, especially if you're seeing it for the first time. I would encourage you to go to studentaid.gov, take a look at that FAFSA aid estimator. It's not going to have any state aid on there or institutional aid that could come from a college or university, but it will give you an idea of what you are eligible for federally, whether you would get a Pell Grant or not, whether you would get an FSEOG grant, and whether or not you'd be eligible for work study. So that is, can be very, very helpful when you and your parents are planning for you to go to college. Sometimes it is difficult. I've had students over the years, especially when I worked at public high schools, it was sometimes difficult if students were separated to get the tax information. And that was when, sometimes students had to work. So there is a general deadline. I want to say, let's see. Is it on this one? So you can submit it up until June 30th of 2024. So that's when the FAFSA, so you can see that deadline is the end of June typically. Colleges and universities, though, may have like a May or earlier in June deadline, because colleges they only have so much money, right, for the work study and the FSEOG grant. So they may have a deadline that's a bit sooner, so they know how many students they have to, that are eligible for work study or eligible for FSEOG. They are given a pot of money from the federal government, and then they get to decide at the institution exactly how they, divvy up and give that money out. So it's always October 1st. Just another hint, you're going to create an ID and a password. Student is and parent is. You're going to use those for all 4 years. So I have a son who is 6 years older than my daughter. He went through college, and then my daughter came along, and I had to say, oh my gosh, where did we put that file with the FAFSA log on? Because here it is years later, and I need it for my daughter. So luckily, I we kept it all with our tax returns and we were able to locate it. So we were sweating it out for a little bit because it had been years since we had used that folder. So just, you know, you can recover your password, but as you can imagine, with all this very, very sensitive information in the FAFSA database, they have it locked down pretty tightly. And, it's not always easy to recover passwords. You can't make a new account. It's a whole thing. So just a word to the wise, make those usernames, make those passwords, and then kind of, hang on to them. Does anybody have any other questions?